other Thursday night, me and Billy Ferguson get together for business, leadership, and lessons learned. Here we are. I'm excited, Billy. This is our second episode together here on the rebranded. It's no longer the Second Chance podcast. I have over 100 episodes of good content that we put out there between all the guests that I had and you, and we are forward thinking, forward moving, forward facing with a new branded Jeff Robertson show with a different outlook. And we're gonna be playing around the same issues you and I enjoy talking about, but we're gonna carry a different conversation and come out of a different playbook as we're going through it. So that's kindly just the opening, Billy. What's going on in your world today?
Same old, Jeff. Exciting, hot. But yeah, I'm excited to be on tonight, and I look forward to this every week when it comes up. I know that may sound cliche, but with the Jeff Robertson show, and I think you picked a good time to kind of rebrand and remarket and set back and take a focus on, here's where we're at on the Second Chance podcast. Now let's move to, I did used to play guitar with some guys, and we had this instructor there. And one of the things he would always say is, all right, guys, now we're moving from elementary school to middle school. And, I think we use the same analogy here. So with the Second Chance podcast, that's middle school. Now we've graduated from that. We're going to the next step. Now we're in high school and moving to the Jeff Robertson show. And I really thank you for letting me be a part of it a couple times a month on business, leadership, and lessons learned, because I think we've got a good thing going. And sometimes, when I get off here at night and I think, well, I really rambled a lot, or did we really accomplish it? Then when I go back tomorrow and rewatch it, I'm like, well, dang, that was pretty good. So I also want to remind people, I try to do this every week, that we're doing this live. I'm sitting in my office right now, and you're sitting in your office. So, if it's people that are joining us online, you're able to type in questions, and we're seeing those in full time. So take advantage of that, and let's get some interaction going amongst the thousands of listeners that we've already have there. I want to say hundreds of thousands, but I didn't want to exaggerate. So
for the millions or the thousands in attendance and the millions watching at home, right? That's what Michael Buffer used to say. Good. You got the heat. You covered a lot of things there, Billy. Any good news your way? Anything for the 1 minute good news brief?
Well, yeah. Life is going good for me. Ferguson Safety Solutions is moving on along slowly but surely, but staying. Got several projects in the works. I've got 3 right now I'm working on. I actually got a guy text me today wanting to expand on one that we'd already committed to up in Whitfield. So that was exciting. And also, that I've entered the political realm now and running for public office on the November 4th election. So that's been scary at first, but as time has went on, it's became now I'm in the exciting phase of it, I believe, and getting a lot of good comments and meeting a lot of folks. And I've lived in Rocky Mount 63 years, and I'm still seeing people and talking to people that I've never even talked to before. And it's all about, I truly believe, and I've been told by some political pundits and strategists that I've had the opportunity to talk to, because I've got some good background support that's helping me out. I don't want to say they're holding my hand, but they're giving me tips on this is what you need to do. And basically, the thing I'm learning is it's all about, social media is great, wearing T-shirts is great, but it's all boots on the ground, knocking on the doors. And my goal is to knock on every door in the Rocky Mountain District. I may not meet that goal, but that's certainly I want to give it that personal touch. And
how many doors is it, Billy?
It's about almost 2,000 households.
Yeah, I knew you'd be close.
Because the Rocky Mountain District covers a little bit outside of Rocky Mount. That was a challenge I had. It's going through the signatures, which was kind of crazy. You had to get 125 signatures of eligible voters within the Rocky Mount district to be able to get your name on the ballot. Well, you'd be surprised of how many folks didn't know what district they lived in, number one. And number two, they thought because they have a Rocky Mount address, that put them in the Rocky Mount district, but that's not true. You're very familiar with Rocky Mount, with the Rocky Mount proper, and really going towards Roanoke, it goes to right there to the Blackwater Bridge. But if you're going down 40, it stops at Lowe's.
Yeah.
And you know that's still actually almost in town. But then you go into the Union Hall district, and those districts are they when they're set up and they went through redistricting last year, they have to be as equal as they can be based on population. It's not land mass. So you take it, and if you take Franklin County and divide it up with the 7 magisterial districts, it came to about 7,000 eligible voters. So you had to take 7,000 and put it in the Rocky Mount district. Well, you got almost 5,000 in Rocky Mount town itself. So that shows the spillover where you take the Blue Ridge district or the Boone district or the Gills Creek, you know, land mass, they're 5 times the size of the Rocky Mount district, but they still have the same number of people in them. So I think I think that was the most surprising thing that I had when I was going around, because people would say, "Oh, well, I live in the Rocky Mount district. Where do you live?" "Well, I live between Boonesville and Rocky Mount." I'm like, "Well, you're not in the Rocky Mount district. You're in the Boone district." "Well, I got a Rocky Mount address." "Well, that doesn't matter." You know, you take going 220 south, Rocky Mount address runs all the way to Henry County line.
Yeah. But
the Rocky Mount district stops about 619. So that was a challenge, and you would. It took some learning. Let's just say you had to get a lot more signatures than 125 to get on the ballot. You had to have 125 of registered voters that were in that district. So a lot of people, and I don't think nobody did it nefariously. It was just that they didn't know, and sometimes I didn't know. Where that, like, I live right off of Rakes Road. Well, if you're going down Rakes Road, you're in the Rocky Mount district. But when you get to Rakes Road, the end, if you go right, you're in the Rocky Mount district. If you go left, you're in the Ferrum district. So sometimes it's split by road. So it got crazy there.
So here's in case you ever on a cruise ship with me and some trivia comes up, Billy. You never know how these questions are going to go when you're on a cruise ship. And you'll remember this when I tell you. I was on the team that helped address the county.
I remember that. Yeah.
So yeah. So I always tell people, like, here's some random trivia. But here's so to keep going on that was we had those map books and territorials and or territories and all those things. But that was something where I felt like I could take you to that marker, right, or that last address. There's a point in time I couldn't do it today. Jay Mason might be able to. He remembers stuff like that, but he was with me. But I could take you to some of those barriers, and I could tell you, and then why some of the roads are named the way they are through the input from the community or just from a local landmark. And then the other thing I like to share with folks, and a lot of people don't know this, is like when you live at 2022 Old Franklin Turnpike, you're 2 miles down on the right would be the concept there. Based off of how we used to do the address. And so you lower the numbers, you're back into tenths of mileage. And then you just got to know where the street starts at. So that I was telling someone that I was in a meeting there in the town, and a couple of the folks, I actually got to meet the Main Street lady. I can't remember her name, but anyway, I
got Missy.
Yeah. So I was just we were talking, and I was like, "Hey, what's random fact?" And she was like, "Well, I did this. I worked there." And I'm like, "All right, I'll tell you mine." And so I started it, and I kind of ended up getting a little bit of an audience of a couple of people that were like, and I said, "This is why your address is like this, so EMS or the police they'll know where to find you." Now in Postal Service, everyone else knows it's like you're this distance from on the right or left based on even ride. So yeah, so I know how crazy big Rocky Mount is, and how far some of those territories go.
Well, an interesting thing you said that because I used that at my work today, and the two takeaways I still remember that is it's exactly what you said. If you give me address, it's 18500 Virgin Good Highway. I can tell you that that's 18 and a half miles going toward Roanoke, starting at Henry County, going toward Roanoke. Yeah. It's going to be on the right. I mean, I know what that is, but I use that at work all the time. So, well, how do you know that? And I explained just exactly what you did. And the other takeaway I had, Jeff, is, because the odd numbers are always on the left and even numbers are always on the right. But how do you know that? Well, I was taught that, and this stuck with me. You look at it the opposite way you read a newspaper. So you read a newspaper left to right and north to south. But the numbers ran south to north and left to, and right to left. Yeah. So it would depend on, so with that being said, remember it runs south to north. So the starting point on Virgin Good Highway was Henry County. Mm-hmm. So anything on the right was even numbers. Anything on the left was odd numbers. And that's the two things I remember out of all of that.
There's a couple little nuggets that I've always pointed out to folks is because I lived on Orchard for years. Yeah. So when you turned on Orchard Avenue from West Court and you started there and you went down, it ended at the stoplight, picked up Scuffling Hill. Technically, I used to tell everybody, I'm like, oh, y'all live on Orchard Avenue. Because I can tell you from here all the way to across Scuffling Hill, up 641, all the way into Ferrum, I was like, that's all Orchard Avenue. I don't know.
The numbers don't change. Yeah.
But they used to let those old boundaries, like the stoplight there at 40 West Food Fair, that picked up 641, whatever, not 641.
6 Mile Post Road.
6 Mile Post Road, yeah. So that picked up there, right? So they let those old boundaries exist, but technically, by the way the road ran, it was no break in the thing. So there's a handful of roads like that I got asked over the years about why wasn't this, and I was like, yeah, that was. The a little bit like can you imagine trying to change the name on 6 Mile Post Road? You know what I mean? Like that's not going to happen.
One thing we run into even now in doing what I do now, I was having a conversation with a client the other day, and they gave me their address that X123 Hopkins Road. Well, I get to Hopkins Road, and there is the house, and there's the mailbox. But there's no way to get to the house.
Yeah.
The driveway is off of Moyerwood. Yep. And I told them, I said, technically you live on Moyerwood. They said, no, I live on Hopkins Road. I said, well, that's not, I'm just telling you that the address is where your driveway's at.
Yeah. Your house is on fire. It's going to matter.
Your house is where the driveway is.
If you need somebody to push on your chest, it's going to matter.
Yeah.
So you had that. All right. So let me tell folks though, just so everyone knows, we used to, this was, I got to work in 911 for many years, EMS. This is how it just had this background. But there used to be, when you got mail, you got it at Route 1, Box 236, Hardy, Virginia, 24. So there was route and box numbers. And so if you called that, we used to have a 10-digit number that people would call for emergencies in the county, 483-9227, and you would go like, I need an ambulance at Route 1, Box 243. Well, there was no way I had a little bit of a guide from an old thing that someone had put together that come from Postal, but Route 4 may be there was no method to the madness. Like you couldn't. So how we got help to you was you gave me directions to your house. Like you'd be like, hey, you come down from Rocky Mount, right? Or if they had they would try to give it to you from Rocky Mount if you're sending the police, or if you're sending EMS. Some people just knew, hey, Scruggs Rescue Squad, you come out, they'd come up 616, turn right. But we always would try to get them giving directions from me because from Rocky Mount, because then we had map books. I had a big old map that overlooked our terminals. Remember that? It was simple map. Had all our major roads on it, but that's how we would dispatch off of those causes. All right, flip that around to the EMS side. We used to go in people's houses and they would have their directions by the phone. And we used to have the old rotary dials and push button phones back then, but they would have directions, especially if they had to call a lot or if it was one of those things. But then we used to teach that as well. Like, hey, you got to be able to tell that dispatcher how to get to your house. 911 in 92, 93 fixed all that. Well, there were still some holdovers for years, up in, I can tell you through 98 because I was in there, but it wasn't when we switched to street addressing, it fixed that. We had map books, CAD, we had computer aided dispatching like your bigger cities, and we had tons of information. So I could get you to where you were going with a hang up, as long as I captured your number data or your address data.
Well, you mentioned there was some weak chains in link. That's still here now, Jeff. The two nightmares here of running 911 is trailer parks and apartment complexes.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. A lot of times the CAD system will come up with 340 East Court Street. Well, 340 East Court Street is an apartment complex. There's probably 100 apartments there. So when I get there, unless that dispatcher asks what the apartment number is, I'm at 340 East Court Street, and I got to knock on 100 doors.
Yeah.
I see and then when you go into a trailer park, there's no rhyme or reason on how those numbers are there. You may have 142, and then the next one's 28, and the next one, so that is still to this day not been fixed.
So what you might have there, because we did the apartments, that was back in. I just marked the distance to the building. But the thing about it was I did all that. We would go in and did those thinking they were going to approach it differently all right, so let me explain that. So 340 East Court, technically by our standards would have been a private road. But what they decided just through conversations with the company that owned it is they made that 340, right? That is an address. That's how it is. And then they gave each one of them building numbers, and then they would have those are building letters, and then corresponding door numbers. By the other option they could have did there is it could have had its own private road, and then it would have had two whatever, and then you would have your individual partner your numbers there, right? Here's why I say that. Those aren't going to move. We're not going unless something burns down, tears down and gets replaced. We're not going to move those buildings. Mm-hmm. Versus a trailer park. Most time in trailer parks, we would follow the rule, because you just reminded me of that north-south. Depending on where we were at, we would start on whatever end, and we would come in, and everything got the same thing. We tried to draw like a little diagram, and then we would mark them, and then we would put our distance on each one. So then when they did the mapping, all of our stuff was on there. They would use our little crude drawings that we would do for that. Your issue is they've come and gone, and right, they've come and gone. Someone here's where 28 came from. 28 may have been in Snow Creek, and it got sold or pulled, and it got relocated over to Wirtz somewhere in a trailer park there, and on an old slab or what have you, and nobody really. They got mail in a PO box, right? So there's no need at that point in time for. And we use here's the other thing. So if you're using PO boxes, Billy, and we have cell phones now, so there's no hardline number that goes in there, so that necessity went down. So I could see that being a nightmare, especially on the trailer park side. The 340 thing, I can explain that off, but I could really see that being the case for that, because then you might have 10 extra trailers in a trailer park that wasn't there originally.
And you're dancing all around the problem that we had. One is exactly like you said. The day you did it was all correct, but then somebody pulled a trailer out, and then somebody left that vacant lot and put another one. The other thing that's really confused about trailer parks is before 911 addressing came in, where each trailer sat, they had a lot. It was a lot number. So they may still think that's their address, and they will tell EMS or fire police to go to 340 Main Street. And we get there, you got lot 14 on the mailbox. Well, I don't know if lot 14 is 340 or where. It's such no trailer parks are just, unless somebody flags you down or you've been there before or there's fire coming out the windows, it's a crapshoot.
That's I could see that one. I could see that one compounding. All right, so take me back. First off, I want to tell you, congratulations. You've gotten your first official vote for president from Brad. A little comment chimed in there from your buddy Brad, vote for president. So congratulations on that one. And then you might want to remind Brad you're running for board of supervisors
Yeah.
first, president in 3 years.
Yeah, I got to work on that. Well,
Yeah,
actually 4 years because I
that's
get on
right.
the board. I'm just gonna do my one board term, which is all I want, and then I guess maybe the next step to be governor or president. But
That's right.
we'll work that in. Well, thanks, Brad, and he's one of our
Sorting through it.
thousand folks out there tonight. So I'm really glad Brad has tuned in tonight.
What all right, so I'm talking 89ish is when I started with my experience. Was it like this? Was it my early experience, your early experience, Billy? Was it
Uh,
I think I know all the old talk, but let's talk, let you can date it back a little further for the just the greater good of the conversation, and we'll move on.
Okay, I think you call me old right there, but I'm not real short. And I'll remind you that I'm over 40, so by federal law, I'm in a protected class there.
Right.
So yeah, you were spot on with that, and I do a lot of teaching now, and a lot of times the chance will come up to talk about perspective and how people see things. So a couple things that you'll recognize here that was in your wheelhouse, but also predated you is I used to really hate when dispatchers would give us some type of direction, say, well, you go down 223 miles and turn at a bunch of mailboxes.
Yeah.
Well, is a bunch of mailboxes 3 or is it 30? I don't know what a bunch of mailboxes is. Or, it's 2:00 in the morning, it's pouring down the rain, and dispatcher tell me to go down and turn it. There'll be 2 oak trees there and a pine tree. Turn that. I can't see the trees, to know what kind they are. And the one that used to get me, and I know you would probably understand this too. Call would come in and they'd be going, I live right beside of Jeff Robertson. Everybody knows Jeff Robertson. You know where he lives at? Well, no, I don't know Jeff Robertson. I have no idea where he lives at. So those are some of the things. But yeah, it's kind of when you came in, I went all the way back to 80, but it was kind of like the same thing. And it was really traumatizing to the responders and aggravating because there were no cell phones. There was no AVLs to look at. I listen to calls now and they'll say, well, now I'm sitting here. Can you pull up the CAD and tell me if you can see me or not? And how many driveways, what color the roof is? Well, to us, that was something out of George Orwell.
Yeah.
Something, we didn't know where you was going. And we had this dispatcher, and God rest his soul now, Curtis Jones. I know you probably remember Curtis. I'll never forget. They gave us a fire call up on Coles Creek Road. No, I'm sorry, not Coles Creek, Hopkins Road, coming in off a 6 mile post. And we kept calling back for directions. And finally, the dispatcher got aggravated. And it's about 1:00 in the morning. And finally, he said, well, Medic 2, just go up the road, blow your siren, and stop at the first fire you get to. So it's kind of like that. But no, it's, people living in that world today they think they have bad times. Just like you said, let's go back to where you had to give out. And that's when knowing your territory really mattered.
Yes.
As to where to turn. And I see how, back then I used to know that if you told me 705, I knew that was go to Glade Hill and take a left. And, not Glade Hill, Redwood. But now I've forgotten all that stuff. And even though it's still the state post, that now you need to tell me to go to Redwood Road or tell me to go to Colonial Turnpike or tell me to go to 6 mile post to get there. So it's good. It's all good. It worked out.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Sunday my son played ball in we were in South Boston. And I don't mind telling you, man, we were talking going down the road and I had to leave South Boston. We had the late game. So we got done around 7 and then I had to drive to Blacksburg. So I was from there. I had about a 3-hour drive ahead of me. and we were riding down the road, getting to where we were going, and he was like, we're talking, it's like, hey, we're gonna get done. Here's our plan. As soon as we're done, we want to be in the car. I'm gonna get us to here. We're gonna grab dinner. So I just kind of telling him the plan. And I was like, and here's the cool part. I said, you're gonna get to ride up Route 40 with me when the sun's going down in Franklin County. And there's no, like, I've done that ride a couple times when I've been out there visiting somebody, or Joey had his birthday party out there one time, and I got to ride, and the sun it would hit all right around that time of just when you come into Union Hall and you start cresting up, and where it flattens out and the mountains are behind it. It's a beautiful. But I was telling him exactly what you're saying, and I was like, this road number was this, and because I had worked that area. For a handful of years. So I just kind of knew it, but then addressing it, I still had the relation, but I have to get in it and have to start having the conversation. And then as the roads are coming up, and I can say, well, this was this, and we called it this because I was just telling him. He said it was bored out of his mind, but I was giving him the same lesson that I was giving you on, but the numbers is those, because I did so much in the numbers, and then I had to convert to the road names. And then remember, I kind of went into task force work. So I didn't have that same repetitive that you have over these years, to where you've kind of lost that. So once you get me going, I can put both of them together. If I sometimes I can remember the number before I can the thing, because I wasn't it wasn't ingrained in my head of those new road names like it is yours after all these years.
Yeah, it's there. It is there. I mean, and it comes back. I guess it's like riding a bike. We'll never lose it as much as we get it and everything. So.
When you let's just stay on your campaign trail here, and I sent you a thing. We'll talk about that in a second. But when you're door to door, and what are some things that's been surprising to you, or some things that you want to share that you have been experiencing on the campaign trail?
Well, I think that one is, like I said, is people are really, I think, discouraged with the current leadership. I don't think it's any one person, and they, don't get me wrong, they're great people there now, but a lot of them has been there for several terms. The chair himself is going on, I believe, 17 years. So, it's kind of like you kind of get, I don't want to say burn out, but you kind of get complacent and stuff. And I put out a post yesterday and earlier today. As a matter of fact, it was right before it went on the air about, I'm running for the Rocky Mountain District. So, Jeff, a lot of people doesn't realize, and I put this out the other day, but in Virginia, so let me back up a little bit, Jeff. How many independent cities do you think there are in the United States?
You told me this. We've had this on a couple episodes. There's 7, ain't it? Something like that?
No, it's 41 in the
entire. How many's in Virginia?
Right, 38 of them in Virginia.
Yeah.
There's only 3 of them outside Virginia, and that is Baltimore, Maryland, St. Louis.
I couldn't fit 7 into that conversation at all to make it make sense.
That just is something that I've always been interested in, and it's Baltimore, St. Louis, and Carson City, Nevada. So the reason that's important is that in Virginia, cities are independent jurisdictions. They're not members of counties. If you live in Roanoke City, you don't live in Roanoke County. And a lot of people think you do, but you don't. Or if you live in Vinton, you do live in Roanoke County. And so there's advantages and disadvantages to that. And one of I think, of the disadvantages is that if you live in a town, you're double taxed because you live in the county also. So you're paying taxes to the town of Rocky Mount. And you're also paying taxes to the county of Franklin. And the thing I put out tonight was, are our citizens that live within the town of Rocky Mount who are double taxed, are they getting fair representation by the county? So what does my town tax pay for? Well, it pays for police protection. It pays for fire protection. It pays for roads, because in the county, roads are maintained by the state. in cities and towns, a lot of that's maintained by the locality. When Rocky Mount is paving a road, Rocky Mount is responsible for that road, not VDOT. And if that's out in the county, then VDOT's responsible for that road. We got parks. We got many beautiful parks in Rocky Mount that's paid for by the town citizens. So we got garbage service, we got water, we got sewer, we got all that stuff that the Rocky Mount taxpayers are paying for, but they're still paying county taxes. So what am I getting for my county tax? Well, I'm getting schools. I've got an animal shelter. I've got animal control that's paid for by the county. But then there's very little other stuff that's really, libraries or for the county. But there's very little. I just don't think that the town citizens are getting their fair shake from the county, from the Board of Supervisors there, because Jeff, I worked for 33 years for the county. I sat in a lot of meetings. I know the inner workings of that stuff. I know what happens behind closed doors. And I know that, example, that was recently here, Rocky Mount Fire Department, which is a great department. They needed 2 new pieces of apparatus. And what was always said, well, that's the town's problem. That ain't our problem. That's the town. They want a fire department, let them pay for it. Well, I get that, what they're saying there. But remember, those town citizens are also county citizens that are paying to have that service provided by them. So not only are they paying the town, they're paying the county. And the town of Rocky Mount Fire Department, over 60% of their calls are ran in the county of Franklin. But yet the county does not equally fund them like they would a county department, all because it's in the town. I can remember we would get these smoke detectors that were gotten on a grant, and now the Red Cross is putting them up. And one of the questions that would always ask, so if Jeff Robertson called in and said, hey, I need a smoke detector in my house, there was a couple questions you had to answer. One is, do you own the house? Number 2, do you live within the town of Rocky Mount? And if the answer to question number 1 was yes, then you were good because you had to be the homeowner, but you had to live outside the town of Rocky Mount. You had to live in Franklin County. Well, hold up here. If I live in Rocky Mount, I do live in Franklin County. But with that being said, you were not eligible for a smoke detector. The answer was you need to call the Rocky Mount Town Manager's Office of the Rocky Mount Fire Department. Well, that's not really, because you are a citizen. Now, Roanoke City is different. Roanoke City, you do not live in a county. Martinsville, you do not live in a county. And other states are different. If you live in Greensboro, North Carolina, you still live in Guilford County, North Carolina. If you live in Nashville, Tennessee, you still live in Davidson County, Tennessee. But in Virginia, it's not like that. So I just don't think that the citizens are getting a fair shake from the representation in Rocky Mount right now. Great guy. I have nothing bad to say about the gentleman that's there now. But I think that sometimes that they don't get a fair shake. And I think that a lot of times too, I think that sometimes it challenges me, Jeff, with my thought process, because we was talking a little bit about another locality earlier, and I travel a lot, especially within the state of Virginia, and there's not a county I don't go through that you don't see the apartment complexes going up, you don't see new industry going up, you don't see businesses going up, except Franklin County. And sometimes I think that, the lip service is there, that we're trying to recruit business and we're trying to do this. And I get it. That's a very competitive thing to do. But look like, we would get one every now and then. I can remember back in the late 90s, and you may have remembered it too, there was a gold shovel in the old boardroom up at the courthouse in Franklin County. And it was there beside a newspaper article that the Roanoke Times had written of how fast Franklin County was growing in the 90s. In the 90s, Franklin County was the fastest growing county west of Richmond. I mean, it grew at 18% a year. Now it's actually losing some population.
Yeah.
So
why is that? Why?
Well,
you're jogging my memory there on a couple of those things. But you got to remember, I exited, and then I've you talking to me. I could say I probably quit being in the county full time probably around 2000, right? So I'm not tuned in with a lot of that stuff. So why was the county? What was the keys to the success then? And then where did it go?
Well, I think that one thing that Smith Mountain Lake exploded in that time frame. I can remember, we used to have medevac helicopters come in, and we would have these pre-designated landing zones, and we had to go away from that because you'd have a pre-designated landing zone this week. Next week, it'd be a building there.
Yeah.
I think that Franklin County had a big influx of people, but I think that Franklin County wanted to grow, had a desire to grow, and went out of their way to be customer friendly doing that. And I think now that I'm not sure that's happening now. I think that Franklin County government gives the perception in outside meetings that they're wanting to grow, but really they don't want to. They want to remain rural and stay rural. And I've heard people say in some meetings that, well, we don't want that. If they want that, tell them to go to Roanoke, or tell them to go to Martinsville. We don't want that. And to me, if you come here and want to put a business, you ought to bend over backwards to get that business here, because if they don't, they're going to go somewhere else. So, I mean, what makes, Franklin County has got one commodity we really have is land. And I think that we don't do a lot to promote that. Whether it be large business, small business. I don't think we've ever done a good job of promoting ourselves and letting people know what we do. And I'll give you another example. It's kind of getting off the business here, but I used to have a talk with some of the county leaders about, let's tell the citizens what we do for our tax money. We tell them we got the lowest tax rate around, and we do second to Bedford. Bedford's a little bit cheaper. But what do we do with that money? They see, that they break it out. They put this big pie chart up, or they take a dollar bill and say, all right, well, 16% of the budget goes to public safety. What does that mean? What does that really mean? I want to know that, that 16 million, and 2 million went to the sheriff's office, and out of that, 40,000 was for cars, 2,000 was for radar. I want to know what that stuff was. I want it drilled down into exactly what it's spent for, because I can find that a little bit more palatable than you tell me that $16 million went to public safety. And, public safety, and the functionality of public safety is fire, EMS, animal control, law enforcement, jail services, court services, all that's wrapped in. Well, tell me that. Let me know that. But there's nowhere you can find that. So I think that that's a problem. And I think that we take our board is historically adamantly opposed to short-term rentals, and they come up with all these partying reasons and all this stuff. But yet Bedford County, which is very similar to Franklin County, is making millions of dollars for short-term rentals, and it's not an Armageddon in Bedford County. You go to Virginia Beach, and for 3 blocks from the beach, you got big signs: short-term rental, short-term rental, short-term rental. But our board is adamantly opposed to short-term rentals. I just don't think that. I just really, Jeff, and I know this is going out to my thousands of viewers here, that I don't think that our local government or the local folks we have down now really have a strong desire to see the county grow. I think they're would be satisfied if they just stayed status quo and moved on. And I had a wise man tell me one time that when you stop growing, you start dying. And I think that, and when a lot of these developers come in, especially, we've been talking about needing housing shortage. Everybody knows the housing shortage, but yet we start putting so many roadblocks in front of the developers. They're like, well, I'm out of here. I'm gonna go to Botetourt, or I'm gonna go to Powhatan County, or I'm gonna go to Fluvanna County. They work with me. They want to know is, how can we help you? We want this house, and what can we do to make it happen? Where, you come into Franklin County, we hand you a bunch of documents. Well, when you get all this, you come back and we'll talk to you about it. I think that hurts a lot. And I think there's not a lot of there's not a lot of opportunity. I mean, I think that within Franklin County, and I love Franklin County. I have Franklin County mud running through my veins. I mean, so it does pain me to see that there is not a lot of job opportunity. When you and I were growing up, everybody worked at the Lane Company or somewhere in furniture, or they worked in fabric. That was kind of like Martinsville. You either made something with fabric or you made something with wood. And you don't have that. You don't have that no more. So, there's service industry. We have a lot of small businesses, which is great. And I'd rather have 10 small businesses than one large business. I think it's more, makes your community more vibrant. But I don't think I've ever saw in the last 6 years. I think I missed 2 Board of Supervisors meetings in 6 years, and I never saw a business come in or a developer come in and make a presentation that there wasn't 10,000 questions on why this is not what we're looking for. Well, what are you looking for? You tell me what you want. And I think that's it. And that's why I think it's time to be more business friendly and more developer friendly. And I think you don't want Northern Virginia, but you've got to have controlled growth. And do I have the answer for that? No, but I've got a new set of eyes on it that can look at it. And I know that, and I see that. And should every short-term rental come in here, open up and be accepted? No. But right now, the thing is we're not going to vote none of them. And last week, there was a solar, very small solar facility wanted to come in. And it ended up passing on a 5-2 vote. But one of the board members even made the statement in open board: if we can't vote this in, we might as well never vote on one, because these people have done everything we asked them to do. Everything we asked them, they've checked the boxes. And what is happening in the solar world is that there's a very big push at the state now to take that away from the locality. And the locality it'll be like pipelines. If the state says you can do it, you can do it. And you don't want that.
All right, so David here, that's interesting. I didn't know, I hadn't thought about that. To just like with the same type thing because there's this whole push for renewable energy and solar, but nobody really wants to. And I get it, I see it, but so in order to meet those things, what you're talking about there is not unheard of.
No, it's not. It's all over like that, but it's disheartening to me. And I think a lot of developers, and I'm certainly not a developer, but if I go to Jeff Robertson and I say, Jeff, I want to open up this widget business on Williamson Road in Roanoke, and you're the small business developer, what am I supposed to do? And you tell me, all right, you got to have X, Y, Z. Well, I get X, Y, Z, and I come back and you say, well, I forgot to tell you need ABC too. And then I go back and do ABC, and I go back and you say, well, did you do Q and R? Well, no, why don't you tell me? And it's just, you just keep, and after a while, I'm like, well, the heck with this. I'll go to Rockbridge County. Yeah. And in the end, you just don't want that. It is past 5-2, and the 2 people voted no has already made the statements. They're not going to vote for it, no matter what you want. But yet, those same people will come up in board meetings and say that they believe in land rights and property rights, and you as a property owner, government should not tell you what to do with your land. Well, hold on a minute. So you're telling me you can't tell me what to do with my land, but now I want to put a solar farm there. I can't do that. And I'm not saying I'm a proponent of solar farms. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying you cannot have land rights and tell me that I can't do that. It's got to be one way that you got to pick a side and go with it. But yeah, there's a big push in the state General Assembly now to remove, because this is happening everywhere, not just Franklin County with solar farms. And there's a big push now from the solar industry to take that approval away from the locality and the state would make the approval. So if you wanted to put a solar farm in Roanoke City would have no say in it. It would go to the state, and the state can make that determination. Same way pipeline is now. When Mountain Valley Pipeline was coming through, all the localities were catching a lot of flack. Well, the locality had no authority. That's regulated by the federal government. The state can't even regulate pipelines. Some people were upset about it and kept going through all these lawsuits. But the day that pipeline company came in and said, we're coming, they were coming. Whether it meant it took them a lot more years and took them a lot more money, but they're pumping gas.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did not know that. I mean, that has to be a huge weight off of your local folks' shoulders too, right? There's some decision, because I can see that really being a tough decision in all things, because I didn't know that. I can see there's a lot of moving parts with that.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot, and I think that the other side of that coin is, Jeff, you made mention, is there's a huge push nationally to get off of fossil fuels and go to alternative methods, whether it be solar, whether it be wind, whether it be nuclear, whatever it may be out there. But it's all not in my backyard. It's okay if we put that up in Botetourt or we put it down in Halifax. But man, we don't want none of these windmills in Franklin County. But we've got to come to a happy medium there. Now, I do say one thing that maybe we need to look at, and I followed the solar industry a little bit. So instead of putting them in farmland, let's put them on top of Walmarts. Let's put them on top of Ply Gyms. Let's put them on, places like that. And I think that's an alternative. But the other side is to it, it's got to be in the right place. Just because I got a Walmart, that has to face a certain way to get the maximum amount of sun. And, so sometimes it's a lot more. It's like everything else. The devil's in the details. It's a lot more.
Would it be, so let's go down this rabbit hole of, it's very hypothetical. But could you see like a California, where they are very, very bought into environmental, and could you see like that being part of a zoning on a Walmart, that you had part of your roof structure had to be occupied by X number of solar panels, or some kind of zoning ordinance like they do with signage? You made me think about that, of why, like, I could see some jurisdictions passing that to be more renewable friendly.
You're absolutely right, and you're being more proactive there than you thought you would. But there's a couple localities out now that have mandated that any new parking garages built in the city or the county, the top floor has to be solar panels, which is great.
You see that? You see that out west, their parking garages are a little different. Like in Arizona, there's covered parking everywhere just because of the heat. Every one of those covered parkings is a solar panel.
Right.
And you parking under a solar panel.
It's out there now. And the one that comes to mind locally, I think, would be, and I know you did too. I just recently flew out of Roanoke Airport, and they've got those covered walkways in the center of their airport. And I mean, they're not large, but they certainly, you could put 100 solar panels up there or something like that. So, I think there's alternatives to it. But again, I think that if you are for property rights, and you tell me the government should not tell me what I can do, and I've got 100 acres out here that I own, and I want to put a solar farm there, how can you tell me I can't, if I'm meeting all the rules and playing by all the rules, just because you don't think it should be there? If you don't think it should be there, then you should create countywide zoning, and then I would know that. But no, the status there is not to do that. And I'm not a proponent of zoning either. I'm just saying that you got to have, you can't play both sides of the fence. And I don't know how we got off on that, Jeff, but
I was going to tell you, Billy.
Interesting conversation. I'm enjoying.
It was. We just got to commit to no politics in our next meeting, so we can get down in the weeds on some good public safety catch up on some different things there, because we have talked for 49 of our 60 minutes.
Absolutely.
Which it was. Listen, man, I like it. I had a couple of friends that said, "Hey, man, when Billy was talking about Dillon Rule, And he's like, I didn't know that. I was like, yeah, I forgot about it. All right. So, and there's been a couple things that we've talked about in these things because I'm curious, right? Because listen, when I was going through that regime, I still like, you got my interest because I enjoy expanding my knowledge, but it's not something that I'm going to go and do a ton of research on unless it's, around but I enjoy kind of learning what you teach me there about how these things work and some of the inner workings and um, why things function the way they do. And I think because I've told you this before is you scroll and you can find a comment of where everybody's just like, why is this and they do this. They're like, no. There's a reason why it is like that. And there's a it's not that it's not really being made up as it goes. It seems like it sometimes, but there's things in place that flow alongside it. So I really appreciate you giving us that insight. And I teed you up because I think part of of just the audience of just me and the people knowing like what your week looks like is me saying, hey, what's it like on the campaign trail? And you're able to share these real life firsthand conversations of what your community's saying. Now, there ain't nothing in the world wrong with getting in tune with, especially if you're going to do what you're going to do. It's nothing. Absolutely, get in tune with what your constituents want. Not what really Billy wants. Billy, you might agree with it. You might explain, hey, this is why this is the way it is. But I think you hit it there earlier. Is when you got into the tax part, it's like I just think we get away from transparency. And
And Jeff, I'm going to interrupt you right there. That's so I haven't revealed all of my platform out to folks, but I really got 5 points that if I'm elected, that I really want to focus on. And the first one is kind of what we've been talking about there today is accountability and transparency. And I don't think we do a real good job of that. I made a post the other day about that. I've sat in meetings and, you've got somebody comes there and puts a lot of data up on the board. And before long, everybody in there is so confused. We don't know what we're even going for. So let's break it down and okay, we can we put this solar farm here or can we put this pipeline here? Let's tell people why we can't. Why didn't we get out in front of the pipeline and say, hey, this pipeline's looking at coming here. We don't really agree or disagree with it. The reality is we ain't got to say it. As long as they meet what FERC says, they can put a pipeline here. And it ain't nothing that any of us can do. And, you need to take it to your federal folks to do that. And the same thing with a lot of this other stuff. If Jeff goes out here and builds a $5 million house in Fairham, and then I come in and put a pig farm in beside it, Jeff probably ain't gonna like it, but ain't nothing Jeff can do about it because it's not a zoned area. Well, then that's when the people come and go, well, Jeff, I just built this $5 million house and Jeff Ross put a pig farm. We need to do something. Well, ain't nothing I can do about it. Billy Ferguson on the other side and put a junkyard. Well, the only way to fix that was zone. Well, we don't want that zone and we don't want you telling us what we can do. Well, here's a conundrum. Do we do it this way or do we do it this way? So I think that my number one thing there is accountability and transparency. Tell me why we need this tax dollar, and then tell me how this tax dollar was spent. Don't come and tell me we need a new fire truck and everybody gets behind it, and then we go out and we build a fishing pond. If we need a fishing pond, tell me we need a fishing pond. And I don't see that that's being done a lot. And I don't want to say that it's. I think that people knew the question to ask, and they asked the question. The government leaders will give them the answer, but a lot of times the people don't know the question to ask, so they're not. It's kind of like the old thing: tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Well, how many times have you said to your mom, well, why didn't you tell me that? Well, you didn't ask me. And I think the same thing goes here. I can tell you the truth and still not tell you all the truth.
yeah,
And I think that's what happens when I think with the transparency that we would do that. So that's the first thing on my platform. And the second thing that I will reveal tonight as we go through, I'll talk about the others in the upcoming episodes. But the next one's economic development, because to me, if you don't have economic development, then money has to pay for all that other stuff. Um, and see, the economic development is the way you're gonna get the money. Because that brings in businesses, and business brings in residents. Residents bring in money. Um, and it goes back a little bit like the harvester. You and I talked about that a while back. That brings in a lot of money to the town of Rocky Mount, but a lot of people don't see that because they don't see all the ancillary spinoff stuff that's happening there. So 2 out of 5, and I count accountability and transparency as one, and next is economic development. I've got 3 more things that I would like to strongly work on in my campaign, in my term if I was elected. And remember, I'm only 1 vote, so I can't promise you anything other than if I'm elected that I will work strong to advocate for those things. And I guess the takeaway here is I don't believe that's happening in a lot of instances right now.
You keep me up with something you said there. We in our lessons learned segment here tonight. I've got see here about 4 minutes. Billy,
Yep.
thanks a lot. Um, but no, here's what I want to tell you, folks. I had told Billy, hey, I'm going to open. I'm going to pitch it to you, then pitch it back to me, and I'm going to run through this, and then we'll do. And Billy, you stole the show, man. That was all good stuff. But here's what I've been wanting to tell you. Um, I'm excited. I'm excited to keep hearing your journey there and just learning and through our conversations, right? 'Cause I don't live in Franklin County. I love Franklin County. I don't. If you don't get elected for this, me and you still gonna be friends. You get elected, me and you still gonna be friends, right? So I'm not. I don't have a dog, but I enjoy that conversation and you. Um, the way that you explain things is like some of my cash flow Mike, right? I told you, it's like, hey, you just explain stuff the way that I understand it, and then people have told me that, so I appreciate that. But here's what I've been wanting to tell you. Remember the other week when we were talking, we were working through our just some mental health stuff, and we were talking. I was kind of telling you about my conversation with Kenny, and Kenny Mitchell he had said his fire chief that he had worked for had took his life, and Kenny had reached out for me, and he had told me that. And the fire chief had retired and all those things. Remember me telling you this, Billy?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah,
All
I
right.
remember the conversation.
So that man, Ken's a good dude, and I pay attention to the timeliness of things sometimes. And I was really Kenny when I first met Kenny. He told me he heard me one of my speeches, and you're all like a couple weeks later. He said, man, you got amazing content. He says you're just all over the place. Like it's hard to pin you down. And I was like, and I told him, I was like, dude, I've heard that when you said it. And I said, I went to work in my head and just my different things and just trying to find a flow. And does this work? And does this thing? And when he told me that about his fire chief building, it got me really thinking. And then I just kind of went to work on. Remember, I told you all that stuff: breaking curses, second chance
Mhm.
podcast, life, Jeff growing up, and public safety, setback, getting arrested, all that stuff that I got to experience, and I'm looking at it through a positive lens, not a negative lens, folks. So, I mean, this has been a good life. Um, I can say this with a smile. But here's what I wanted to tell you. This is where I worked on it. I put together part of the work and hopefully some of the engagements that you and I'll get to do through um, your case study and kind of your scene study and takeaway and our communications and some of the other business lessons that come and leadership and public safety lessons that come out of your talk. One of mine here that I worked on was, and this is what I called it, is if I ask who you really are, you got to tell me or it's entrapment. And in undercover work, there's this misnomer about, hey, if I ask for your cop, you got to tell me or it's entrapment, right?
Mhm.
And I got to experience it firsthand, and I got to hear later their side of it, my side of it, like we all kind of laugh and joke about it. It's kind of like game warden searching your house, right?
Mhm.
Um, There's a little, but so where it comes from is Billy. I really figured out that part of my issue through all of my public safety years is I didn't know who Jeff Robertson was.
Hmm.
I didn't know I knew I had when I got into being I was an EMT. I was a damn good EMT. And I was going to be the best EMT, and I was going to work through the cardiac tech, and I was going. That's who I was. And where a little bit of this came from is I told you in a couple of episodes when sometimes when I run into people, they're like, "Hey, how's things at the county?" I said, "I'm like, yeah, I ain't worked there since 2007." I'm like, "What?" And I always thought they were messing with me, but that's who they associate me with because I didn't know, I never had another identity. I didn't know who I was. Um, so not the title, not the rank, not the job, who I actually was. And what the chief got me thinking about that. Like I have this thing in my head of where that was his life, and his identity was wrapped up in being who he was, and he wasn't. No one was around him to really help him figure out, like, hey man, this is kind of who you are. I'm Jeff. I'm a dad, man. I'm a coach of kids. I
Hmm.
coach little league ball. I'm a business coach. I'm a good dude, right? I'm passionate. I've got my core values. But I didn't know that probably, and I didn't really drill that down until the last 5 or 6 years, and just time at the dealership, time and working in the gym and fitness and doing all the stuff that I got to do there, and the conversations I met, and doing some mental health work and working through some of the new treatments that are coming out that that really helped me get my mind to where I could process things and really just slow down. One of my issues was, Billy, is just brain didn't shut off. 2 in the morning, I'm solving crimes. I'm fighting fire. I'm saving that life. I'm thinking about what I could have did different. I'm thinking about you got mad at me. Why is Billy mad at me? I can't. I'd get I carry that with me for days, and it just wouldn't shut off. And and it was like that for many years beyond that job, and so just kids came along and really helped me find that perspective, and really start making me stop and saying, all right, I got these guys got to figure out who their dad is because I got to be able to tell them who I am so I can teach them who they are, right? And it didn't register with me until doing the Second Chance podcast that I had spent a lot of my life in survival mode, and just in straight up survival mode from some childhood stuff that moved right into public safety. We've talked about that a little bit, and I never really got down to where um, I got to know me, and that's where my I got really in my thoughts with the chief, right? So you know it all comes crashing down. And when the script, the rank, the job, when all that ended, here I am like, all right. So what do you know how to do? Well, I don't know if it doesn't have blue lights, I don't. If it doesn't have a badge, if it didn't have some type of purpose behind it, is I had to really go to work and figure out who I was, and I sat down and I just started journaling and thinking about Kenny, the fire chief, and thinking about my situation and Kenny and his conversation with me about that day about, man, you're all over the place. And I came up with a keynote that accompanies if I ask who you really are, you got to tell me or it's entrapment. And it's about helping anybody. But obviously, we have this public safety, law enforcement background, and it's about helping them either A, if they're like me, discover who they are and make them do some soul searching and do some work on who they are before they go be a paramedic, before they go do, if they're a police officer, before they go do that undercover assignment. Because it's easy, if you're like me, it's easy for me to take on somebody else's identity. I can easily come in. That's one of the things where that job became easy to me. Being a deputy in Franklin County, Billy, you might be the only one out there, and you really learn how to talk to people. And you take on their situation as your own really freaking quick sometimes. Um, so I got the keynote all wrote up. And then it took me in, and I started just kind of molding out this workshop with mine. And I was thinking, me and Billy's going to do this event soon. We're probably going to go. It's going to be big. We're probably going to go to Greensboro. We might go to Knoxville. Might go to Kingsport. We're going to do a city outside of Roanoke. Nothing wrong with Roanoke. Might be Bristol, but we just want to go somewhere where it's not just where we're the story's a little further away from the zip code.
Coming to a city near you.
Yeah, right. And so I was thinking, I wrote all this kind of with our mission in mind, man. And you know, we're gonna unpack these real stories with real tools and real situations and real journey. And what I really hope to accomplish is help people either rediscover that identity or really figure out who they are through kind of my path and all the things that I got to experience, good, bad, and indifferent, because I just feel like that is you know, when a man works as hard, or woman, but this is a man that took his life, when he works that long and does that job for that long and has that much love around him and that group, how it is in a firehouse, especially if you're chief, you don't have everybody knows who you are to get that loss, man. And I don't like when it happens. So that's kind of I'm gonna post the link so everybody can see that. We'll put it in the show notes here. That way I'm going to send it to you as well. But that's what I'd like to. I've redone my website a little bit around the whole concept as well. So that's kind of what I want to kick off as far as in that lessons learned part of what we were talking about tonight. And that's kind of what I'm going to work on. I got case studies. I got all sorts of stuff that is I have on the back burner that'll tell that lesson of leadership and how we put a case together or how we work the scene, or all the stuff that if it ever comes up and somebody's like, hey, we want to go down this rabbit hole, I can take you down a lot of rabbit holes. But as far as a mission that I'm pushing out front, that centers in line as we wrap up Men's Mental Health Month, but in our world, it's men and women's mental health freaking minute every day, just because of our exposures and the things that we've been around and the folks that are still on that job. So every minute is a mental health minute in that profession. So, but Mental Health Month was on my mind when I got to thinking about it. But I wanted everybody to have that perspective. Public safety professionals don't. They do a very tough job and they're compensated pennies to do dangerous things by problems that society creates, and the government gives them rules that they got to follow um, to bring justice or help the wounded, right? So I like to always put that in there. But anyway, that's what I wanted to tell you. That's what I was going to. I've been sitting on for. I've been working on kind of. I had the idea last episode, but I couldn't. I wasn't ready to put it out there, and I thought it'd be a great addition. And this. So, Billy, you have the floor if you have any questions about this.
No, I think it is everything, but I do want to say I know where you're coming from, Jeff, on the identity thing, because I walked in to a public safety office in July 1990. I was 27 years old, and when I walked out in April of 2024, I was 62 years old.
Yeah,
and that had been almost my entire life that I had lived that world, and I think that no regrets, but looking back, and I think you come to life with your mortality when I was laying in a hospital bed and I looked up and there was 5 IV fluids, there was 4 IV pumps, and there was 2 cardiac monitors and 3 tubes sticking in my chest, and I knew they're gonna split me open tomorrow morning. It's like, well, wow, what did I miss?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that, it does play on your mind and there, and I think there is some, mental health things going on and PTSD and stuff, and it takes a moment, to kind of control alt delete in your head a little bit to get back. And And you said something there too about waking up in the middle of the night. I was the same way. I'd wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, like, who's working tomorrow? We got enough trucks to cover this. How much damage done, all that. And I used to go to these seminars, and they would preach about, don't take your job home with you. Well, how the heck do you not do that?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, and I used to say this to people, if you're not taking a job home, then you don't care about the job, because I just can't come in here and care 9 to 5. It's not like that. And I have.
Billy, one of the goals of this is to help find that identity where we can. You're not. I can. You're like me, and the people that is going to be attracted to this are going to be similar to us, to where they're go getters, and you're. But we're going to do some work. We're going to try to help folks like us establish those boundaries, so they can be a dad or mom, so they can be present and turn that identity off. I think some of our problem too, Billy, is we lived where we worked. Where I've talked to a couple guys on my podcast from Milwaukee. They're like kids lived in we lived in another district. When we took our uniform on, we got our personal car and went home. That was like they
Yeah.
lived. They was over a couple precincts. Nobody knew there was a cop, and so there's a little bit of that as well. But we're going to do some work on that, because I think that there is some corners that I've turned on that, to where I work hard to kind of be where I'm at. Just putting boundaries in place, and like me and you talking earlier, I'm like, hey, I surrendered about this time, and then I want to go. I gotta go. My identity is that I'm gonna go. I'm hoping. And listen, this is a work in motion, and at some point in time, you're probably gonna be like, hey, fix this or whatever. That's what I'm hoping, and the people that are there is like, because I want this to, I want it to land on ears and not sting ears, because I think that is where we get lost. Is Yeah, it is, man. I went from, there was a point in time I had 4 cell phones and 2 pagers, and
Mhm.
everybody wanted 5 minutes of my time. And when it went away, dude, I was like, it was
Yeah.
lonely. It was lonely. Um, and fire chief, Kenny's buddy, man. He goes from high demand to not, and whatever. And then, you know, um, sometimes I struggle cultivating just relationships, just because of just how I was, how my brain worked. And so helping a lot of firefighters, they're gone a lot. So, but then when they retire, they're home more, and there's friction, because they haven't been around each other that much, and they get on each other's nerves, or what have you. So it's those moments of being help. And Billy, we talked about this a couple episodes ago. The finance part of it
Mhm.
is, as financially sound as they are. They're just learning how to make money. If you think about it, as soon as you and I connected after you retired, some of the things I really started pushing you hard on, like, hey, this is, find this, find this. Hey, think business, think this. Don't. You're not. Got to help you. Let's find some new worth.
Yeah, I remember us having a conversation there at the office parking lot right before I retired. You was there doing a presentation. We had a 5 minute conversation out there, and I really do appreciate that. And I see how that every day goes by. I see how we can transition, you know, the last 30 years into to the private sector. That, yeah, we're kind of doing the same public safety thing, but I'm not talking to a room full of firefighters and a room full of
Yeah.
paramedics. I'm talking to, a room full of IT&T folks, or IBM, or whoever it may be, Amazon or whatever. So, the hat changes, but the scenarios stay the same pretty much.
Yeah. So I appreciate you letting me plug that in during your political rant. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I wanted to tell you about it, because I've been excited. I've been sitting on it, and I've been excited. I'll send you the link. But wrap us up, man. I got your name of your business up here, Ferguson Safety Solutions. Tell everybody how they can get in touch with you and take us home, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you for that, Jeff. The way I make the money is Ferguson Safety Solutions LLC. We specialize in OSHA 1910 120 training and other trainings and disciplines that fall within that or around that. You can get me at wferguson62 at gmail.com, or you can get me through Jeff, or you can also get me at william.ferguson at fergusonsafetysolutions.com. And Jeff always gets a big kick out of that real long name there. But give us a call, give us an email. Let us know what kind of safety issue we're looking at. We got a lot of folks on our team. We got police officers. We just recently got an electrical engineer that's helping us do some classes. So reach out and say, hey, can you help us with this? If I can't, we'll say no. If we can, we will move on from there and talk about how we can help each other. So that's what's paying the bills.
All right, man. Well, listen, 2 weeks was going to work out perfect. I'm on the road. Actually, Billy, I'll text you. We may have to change up our next date. We may have to come in earlier. We may have to do next week. I think I'm on the road that should be like the week of the 7th. I think I'm on the road that week.
Okay.
So I'll let you know on that one. But let's come back. Let's have some. Let's get some. Let's find us a couple case ongoing news topics and get back on some the leadership side. Let's find some public safety topics, and then we can touch on whatever we need to do. But I want to tell everybody thank you for the folks that tuned in live. Thank you for everyone that is that's going to watch this after the fact. And Billy's got some good information there on his work and even his run for office. So make sure if you have questions, he's easy to get in touch with. And then my link, jeffreyrobertson.com. If you like my little segment there on where we're headed, make sure you connect with me. And I would absolutely love to share my new workshop on just how to discover that identity. All right, Billy. Appreciate you, brother.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jeff.